Coach McCreary from Baseball by the Art. Today's video is specifically for coaches in the third base box. It involves some things to think about when you are giving signs to your players. Now, we all do it differently, okay? Everybody's going to have their comfort level in terms of what is a steal, what's a bunt, all that stuff. You guys can work that on your own. Everybody has their pros and cons to all those things. So this video here is not to tell you what your signs should be. It's to try to pass on some information that I've learned, sometimes the hard way, of some of the do's and don'ts when you are giving signs at third base. So when I come back, we'll start talking about the do's and don'ts of giving signs. Okay, tip number one is don't hide your signs from your own players, okay? Basically what I'm saying is keep them simple. It's one thing to say, all right, I have to do something to make sure the other team doesn't get the signs, but if you make them too complicated, you make it too hard for your own players, and that's not what you want. Hitting is hard enough. And a hitter has enough things to think about. He should not have to spend a lot of brain space deciphering your hieroglyphics down there at third base, okay? So keep them simple, tough enough so that the other team can't get them, but not tough enough where you're tricking your own players. Now, tip number two is something I actually wrote about and involves a wipe-off sign. I don't care how basic your signals are. If you have a good wipe-off sign, it can really screw up the other team's ability to get your signs. I don't care how basic they are. So let's say you have a real basic sign of the very first sign I give is the sign. There's no indicator, and let's say, for example, the hat is the bunt. So you tell your team, listen, if I touch my hat on the very first sign, I want you to bunt. Okay, you can't get much more basic than that. There's no indicator. It doesn't matter what hand. Just if I touch my hat first sign, it's the bunt. But if I'm going to do that, I would then add, okay, sometime during when I give my signs, I'm going to give you a wipe-off sign, possibly. It could be the very next sign. It could be the very last sign. So let's say the wipe-off sign is my ear, okay? And the bunt, of course, is the hat. So if I tell my players, the hat's the bunt, so I'm going through the signs, it's bunt, everything's off, okay? Because I went to my ear, I let the guy know whatever I gave you means nothing. So that's very hard for the other team to decipher. They're going to look for the hat and may say, okay, well, I think it's a bunt. And then when you give the hat and they think bunt, and then the last sign is the ear, they still think it's a bunt. When the kid doesn't bunt, now they're all screwed up, okay? So utilize a wipe-off sign. There's an advantage, I think, of using a wipe-off sign later on in your signals, and I'll talk about that on your next tip. Okay, the next tip is try to do what you can to make sure your batters and your runners are watching all of your signs. If only the first couple signs in your sequence mean something, then the batters and the runners are going to have a tendency to ignore any sign after that. And that's a very big tip off to the other team that the only signs they need to pay attention to are the first few that you're giving. You want to make it tougher for the other team, force them to look at every single sign. And so there's a couple ways to do that. First off, put your important signs at the end so that the batters and the runners have to pay attention. You could put your wipe-off sign at the very end and tell them, hey, it could be in the very first sign that I give you the wipe-off sign, or it could be the very end. Either way, with a couple other techniques as well, force your batters and your runners to watch every single sign that you make. Okay, next tip involves whether you're going to use touches or brushes. Okay, so a touch is you actually touch a body part in order to give the sign. Okay, it's one touch means one thing, okay? Brushes are when you do this kind of stuff, okay? Across your chest, across your hat, down. Those are they're what are called brushes. Now, some coaches like to do both, okay? Some do either or. It's fine. Whatever you want to do is what you do. However, one of the challenges you have when you use both touches and brushes is sometimes the runners and the batters don't know what you're giving. So for example, let's say you have a touch sign that involves touching your chest. Maybe you have a logo on your uniform and you tell the guys, all right, when I touch that, maybe after an indicator or something like that, or just at all, that might be a steal or a bunt or a hit and run or something like that. But then you may have another sign which involves brushing down the leg, okay? Well, as a coach, when I give those signs, if I give those two signs back to back, oftentimes the batters and the runners don't know what I'm giving, because this sign right here could have been a chest and then the leg, or it could have been just the leg. If you're far away, the batter and the runner often won't be able to tell whether I touched my chest or whether I just went down my leg. So just be careful. Oftentimes it's good to pick one or the other, touches or brushes. But if you are going to combine the two as you're given signs, make sure you give them very clearly so that there's no confusion as to what it is that you're doing. Okay, my next tip involves some things that you don't want to do as a coach here. Now, you don't want to get into patterns. Now, sometimes we unconsciously do these things, so it's sometimes a good idea to have an extra coach or a players to keep an eye on you to see if they can pick up some of the tendencies that you do. So, for example, if I'm in the third base area and I'm given signs, if it is an important sign, if something is actually on, some coaches will mistakenly basically give the body language that this is an important sign, pay attention. Oftentimes they will do that by stepping closer to the batter. Okay, so they're in their normal position, and the third base coach, I want to put on the steal sign, I want the runner and the batter to see it, so I may step closer and give the signs. When nothing is on, I might just stay still. Okay, and I may not even know I'm doing that. So you want to try to catch yourself if you're getting into any patterns. Now, along those lines, some coaches will make the mistake and face the person that needs to see the sign. So for example, if I want to give a bunt sign and there are runners on base, I might mistakenly face the batter because he's the one that needs to see whatever the bunt sign is. Okay, so if I do that, if I catch it as the other team, I may know a steal's not on because he's not facing the runner, and it's more likely to be a bunt. Conversely, if I want to give the steal sign to the runner, some coaches will make the mistake of facing the runner in order to have the runner see the steal sign, and now they're not giving it to the batter, and so the other team may be able to know what's coming or what's not coming. So the point is, you want to try to mix things up, okay? Turn some ways, look at the batter. Basically, don't get in any patterns in terms of how you are presenting these signals to your batters and to your runners. All right, folks, there are a whole bunch of other tips I can give you, but for the most part, use your common sense as a coach. Put yourself in the shoes of the other team, of those who are trying to decipher your signs. Don't get in any patterns. Be careful about touches and brushes. Don't make them too complicated. Keep them simple. If you can do those basic tips, basically, you're not going to have too much problem giving signs. Your players are going to get them easily, and chances are really good the other team is not going to be able to figure out what you're doing.